you prevent the spread this much. If everybody did that and then got vaccinated, you prevent it this much. If everybody stays home, this is how it works. All of it is probabilistic.
Former Navy officer, host of Human Events Daily, Jack Posobiec.
Yes, exactly. These are OGs. These aren't vipers. These are OGs.
Please.
These aren't vipers. My brother found them in my parents' closet. We've had them since the 90s.
So this guy already sounds like a fucking douchebag.
Welcome back to the stage, Stephen Bonnell.
It's so weird to hear them use his real name when he comes up.
And my man who just hit 150,000 subscribers, the Sean Fitzgerald.
Sean Fitzgerald.
And host
Never
of the
heard
news
of
and
her.
Why It Matters from Blaze TV, Sara Gonzales.
Oh, yes, Daddy.
Sarah, I feel like your shoes need their own introduction.
I was hoping that NASA could see them from space when I was walking here. That was my goal.
I think you're giving Nico a run for his money.
You know,
Is this what right-wing comedy looks like? I'm not fucking impressed.
someone's got to do it, so.
Well, thank you guys for being with us here today. I wanted to start off by saying something that I think is probably obvious to anyone who's at this conference. America is in the midst of an identity crisis. Vanity Fair recently described the controversy surrounding the 1619 Project, for example, as, quote, a fight over who will tell the story of this country and how we think of its identity. It seems as if we are to find any common ground, we might first start by seeing if we can even agree on what is our national story, what does it mean to be an American, what are our country's founding principles, and should they be seen as a source of unity or a source of division? Jack, if you'd like to start.
Wow, okay. You know, it's weird kind of thinking about this sort of like national identity stuff and national narrative, because it feels like every day when, you know, you're sort of in the front lines of, you know, news or breaking news or, you know, cases like Sean covers, you know, so many criminal cases that are going on, that because we've sort of merged the essence really of what our national ideas are, what our conceptions are, what we think of as important, versus just this sort of like dissembling of identity, right, in America. And I think that's the real crisis, is that we've lost the national identity, and somewhere along the line, through, you know, a lot of deconstructivist thinking, and really also through commercialization and, you know, hyper-commercialization, hyper-individualism, where, you know, have people that instead of identifying as maybe, you know, in the past they might have said, well, you know, I'm an American, but I'm also, you know, we were just talking backstage, a Bostonian, you know, or a New Yorker, or, you know, I'm originally from the Philly area, so like you're an Eagles fan, right? You know, and it just is what it is. And of course I'm saying that in Dallas.
Where are douchebags from?
And my dad said
that's
that
brave.
My dad, of course, said he would give me $20 if I said that while I was in Dallas. So, Dad, you owe me. But right, we had these sort of identities, or, you know, maybe a religious identity,
yes,
you know, you're Catholic
Daddy.
and all this. But it, somewhere along the line, we started adding identities, and we added more and more and more and more. And now it seems like those new identities, you know, oh, you know, what shows do you watch? Are you a Marvel fan? Are you a Disney fan? Are you this? Are you that? What political team are you on? Well, I'm this, I'm that. And so you then start to identify as this label that you put yourself on. And it used to be that some of those identities were at least rooted under the, you know, sort of like umbrella identity of being an American, being an American citizen, what that meant. But it, somewhere along the line, probably since the 90s, I feel like it's actually changed, and we're taking the newer identities and sort of forgetting about the older stuff.
Yeah, to double up on what he's saying, the phenomenon that you're referring to is actually called neo-medievalism. And it was like first.
Bro, this seriously sounds like fucking high school kids. This is what this is all about? This is what they're doing? Like, no, I really thought that these were going to be more formidable people. This is a fucking joke.
it's written about in a book, or I first heard about it in a book called The Modern Mercenary, and it was talking about the impact of this on the battlefield because we're relying more and more on contractors. And if you guys know your medieval history, like you would, as a member of society, you would swear allegiance to a lord, a king, and you would also have a faith. And it's like, what happens when your lord is in conflict with your king or in conflict with your faith? This would produce problems and contradictions that can rip societies apart. And we're seeing that not only overseas with our contractors, where we have people who are loyal to companies, their own nation state, their own faith, but we're also seeing that in the United States. Like all this like over-identifying and identifying with things that are in conflict with one another is bound to create these negative consequences. Because again, if you're identifying as something that is in conflict with like an American vision or in conflict with somebody else, or you have multiple contradicting identities.
Here's the thing. Here's what, like, I don't think that anybody that ascribes to a certain ideology within the U.S. that's working and trying to work within the political atmosphere, I don't think they want the demise of the U.S. I think most people that are working in that political atmosphere love our country. And yeah, there's a lot more designations now. But the reason that there's a lot more designations is because as a human species, as a society, we've grown to realize we have to identify with more. There are more things out there that we're dealing with. There are more issues. There are more complications. There's more, like nuance to everything, and I think with that, you end up in a situation where, yes, there's going to be like more ways in which people label each other. That isn't necessarily a bad thing. And that doesn't make any one of these people any less American than the other one. And that ideology, or putting that in people's heads, like I've been called un-American because I'm socialist or have socialist leanings. There is nothing inherently un-American about me wanting a better society and a better safety net for our country. As a matter of fact, that is probably the most fucking American thing you could want to do. Because I'm in a bracket where I'd probably pay more taxes. I don't fucking care. I want to pay those taxes. I would rather pay those taxes if it meant a mom could fucking feed her kids. If it meant, a family could get into an apartment during hard times. What the fuck? These ideas, every time that somebody says, oh, well, if this conflicts with America, you know who America is? It's each and every one of us. Each and every one of us. There is no American ideology. It's the collective whole of all of us, right? So I'm sorry. Anything where they talk about not being, an American ideology, living in this country and being an American citizen and somebody that works within this country, I think is fucking bullshit. It's a bullshit cop-out way to fucking approach shit. It's a way to fucking demonize somebody that has a different ideology than you when they're still looking for the same thing, which is to better the standards for them and the people around them. Maybe you don't agree with their avenue to do so, but that's what they're trying to do. Hi, Arminius.
What happens when those conflicts are brought to the forefront? And I think that's what we're seeing in our society right now.
If I could, I would also just like to add too, I think just as people, as humans, we are tribalistic, right? Like if we look at our ancestors, we were all tribal. And so we have to have this common purpose, this common sense of identity, this common goal. And I think I would agree that we've completely lost sight of what that goal is. And I just think even if you look at in society, even if you look at a smaller subset of people, you look at a family. What happens to a family, a husband and a wife and children who disagree on what their common principles are, who disagree on what their common goals are? Does that family stay together? Absolutely not. And so I think that when you're looking at, how America has really shifted, and we've got these new ideas now, which isn't a surprise because of the indoctrination that's happening in all of these institutions that are teaching our children,
What the fuck indoctrination is she talking about? Pearson creates most of the fucking books in our schools. They're right wing. Read the textbooks. They are heavily right wing leaning. What the fuck is she talking about?
These people who are exiting college, when you're looking at that, it's no surprise that we've lost our sense of identity, but certainly if you are on...
Yeah, Arminius, evolution's a bitch, ain't it?
the train that America needs to come back together, which I recognize there are two thought processes here, and one of them is we just need a national divorce because we're too far gone, and one of them is we need to come back together, and this is how we're going to have to do it. But I would say if you are on the team of coming back together in America, there is absolutely no way we can do it with no sense of common purpose.
But here's the thing. She doesn't want common purpose. She wants her way or the fucking highway. Like, the rhetoric, oh my God, dude, they're all like this? Fuck me. Oh, this is going to take me 4 hours to get through.
I would say that all of us suffer from a really bad bout of recentism. I think it's easy to feel that we have, right now in this moment in history, an incredibly unique fracture in what we would consider an American identity. But I would say that, I mean, one, there have been far worse periods of history in the United States. We literally went to war with ourselves over a fractured identity. But even more importantly, I'd say, like, even in the founding principles of this country, with the Federalist Papers trying to bring together the 13th colonies, we've always kind of had this idea of, yeah, we're Americans, but we're not all just Americans. You've got people that live in different areas. You've got a divide between religious people of different factions. You've got divides between city dwellers and urban dwellers. You've got Midwesterners. You've got NFL fans. There's all these different ways that we've historically always kind of divided us. We've had slaves. We've had not slaves. We've had, Irish and Italian immigrants. We've had so many different groups of come into the United States and ultimately, hopefully, merge together. Now, I think we kind of disagree on what it means to merge. We use the phrase melting pot. We have a lot of different groups here. In some ways, we seem to be like...
Yeah, we got Chargers fans. We got Broncos fans. Got Raiders fans. We got Chiefs fans. Blech.
At strife with one another. But I think that part of the strength of the United States is we've always been, to some extent, pretty fractured. And I think that it's easy to feel, because of all of the unique problems we have lately, especially with social media, that we're in some unique point in history where our identity is fractured. And I mean, aside from the Civil War, aside from internment camps in World War II, aside from crazy college kids that were indoctrinated in the 60s protesting against things like the Vietnam War and civil rights, I think that we've always had a healthy amount of conflict in the U.S. identity. I think that we can do things to bring it together, but I think it's important to recognize that it's not unique that we feel fractured today.
Do you think, though, that it's the level of contempt that we have for one another, for people who disagree with us, is unique, that we're at a pretty high point of contempt? Because it's one thing to say, like, we're fractured, we have different cultures or different opinions and different beliefs, but I think it's another thing to say we also view people with different opinions as morally in the...
Yeah. You have a whole ass mass group of people that won't even believe what fucking science is telling them about a deadly fucking virus. Like, we're fractured because the talking heads on the other side are selling people a bill of goods that's nothing but fucking lies. And they're buying right into it because it feeds their cognitive dissonance. It feeds their fucking confirmation bias. It feeds that shit. And they're eating it up. And they're not being honest with people. That's the problem.
Wrong, and we have contempt for them. Is that something that's new, do you think?
I don't think so. I think that we've had, historically, there have been huge conflicts between different groups of people in the United States, where we've seen, Irish and Italian immigrants were like enemies of the U.S. or couldn't find employment in places. Union versus non-union workers, especially post-civil rights era, was a huge divide in terms of how, should unions be regulating themselves or should the federal government do it, a la the Civil Rights Act. I think we've always had like some level of contempt for each other. I think that what's unique today in U.S. history is the amplification exists in a way that it never did before, which I could maybe say to some extent makes it a little unique. Because, a long time ago, if I hated Joe Schmo in my neighborhood, I hated Joe Schmo in my neighborhood. Maybe everybody in my neighborhood knew. If it was really bad, maybe my church knew. If it was really bad, maybe everybody in the union knew. But nowadays, the entire world can know in a heartbeat if I don't like a particular guy, and uniquely, the entire world can come down on that guy. Cancel culture didn't exist when news only spread as far as your newspaper traveled.
Right. But I would also argue that that's why it is more fractured than in previous times, because as you said, the amplification of one voice can affect so many different people that they didn't even realize that they could affect.
I'm actually not going to disagree with him on that. I like we literally had a mini civil war over the state of Kansas. I think that we've had worse times, and a lot of this like national divorce talk is doom and gloom. And I called it subversive nonsense on Twitter, and people got mad at me for it. But we've had divisions that are deep in this country that have led to conflict in this country. I think the thing that's different now is the way that we view the federal government. Like right now, we believe that when you elect the president, it's that person's job to impose their will on the rest of the country. Like before, we had more checks and balances, so you could have states that were kind of going in their own direction because you had specific roles for the federal government and specific roles for the states. So I don't think it's as bad as it's ever been. I think that is a little bit of catastrophizing for sure, but I think the way we view national politics is worse.
I think also to piggyback on the back of that real quick too, I think that a lot of it becomes a numbers game with the amplification as well. Let's say, for instance, I could show you every single day a new story of a horrific black on white hate crime or white on black hate crime. If I could show you one story every single day, would that even necessarily be a bad thing? In a nation of 330 million people, you're never going to have zero problems. You're never going to have zero crime. There's something called the Chinese bank robber fallacy, where I could theoretically show you 1,000 new Chinese bank robberies happening every single day, assuming that we're looking at all the Chinese people across the world, and it still wouldn't necessarily make it a trend or a bad thing. It's just when you have so many numbers of people, you're bound to be able to pick and choose the types of stories you want to tell, which can lead people into thinking that things are so much worse than they actually are.
So the biggest division today...
I think he's pretty right on with that. Honestly, he really addresses, kind of the heart of it. So, yeah, I mean, we're always going to have conflicts. Our country has never been without conflict, It just hasn't. There's always going to be certain factions that want different things. But that's what makes a country great, right? Is that if it's working how it's supposed to, the people who, are the majority should end up with what it is that drives the direction of the country. So, I can't say I disagree with him. I also don't think that we're in any worse a place than we've ever been historically. I just think it is like we are where we're at. Communication's at an all-time high. It's actually probably kind of better that we're where we're at right now because we can just fuck through some of these problems, like let's just get it out in the open and fucking now there's conversation about it, instead of some of these conversations needing to take fucking 10, 20, 30 years to evolve because we're not having the conversation on a international level. This has actually sped up our process of thinking and our ability to philosophize and understand things. So I am 100% in favor of where we're at. Maybe the truth is that we're not any more divided than we've ever been. It's just now it's transparent.
Isn't necessarily even like political in the sense of conservative, liberal, or Republican, Democrat. The biggest thing is that we're living now in the United States through an era of regime politics. And there is, or there has been, really since probably 2015, 2014, a level of populist sentiment on both the right and the left that has, and I think rightly, targeted this regime of, and it's tied to the federal government, it's tied to the president, it's also tied to Congress, it's tied to many, many institutions throughout the government.
Yeah, the net absolutely does amplify it, for sure. Like I said before, I don't think it's a bad thing. This is how we move forward as a country. Our country has always needed the conversation, and we were in a period of time, and I talk about it all the time. We grew up in it. There was a period of time in which some people grew up in, some generations grew up in, where you were told it's not polite to talk about religion or politics, and it's the worst possible thing that you could tell somebody. What you say is, it's good to talk about these things, and let me show you how to have a contentious discussion without turning into a fucking asshole. That's what you do. But to not talk about it at all means we're not addressing the concerns, we're not addressing the issues, we're not talking to each other as a community to decide what collectively is best for us, and we're leaving it in the hands of other people. And that's flawed. That's flawed, broken logic. Because then you're sitting in your house bitching about the way the world is, and this is how you end up like getting into conspiracy theories and shit. Because you think you have no fucking way out. You think you have no way out. You can go down and work at your county fucking board of supervisors, you know, run for office. You can run for city council. You can run for your HOA association. You can run for fucking like water board, you know. There's all sorts of fucking like jobs that you can get on a local level that will help to better the situation for you. But, you know, because we can't talk about politics, we also don't get to talk about all those vacant elected seats that go by every year. There are tons of seats that nobody fucking runs for different positions. All sorts of shit. You can go be on the corporation commission. You know what I mean? There is a ton. And the more you dig in, the more you find. There's a ton of these things that you can get involved in. If you're a parent, even if you're not a parent, go join the fucking school board, you know? But get involved. For fuck's sake, man. Get the fuck involved. Like, I've been saying it since day one, since I first started streaming on here. Fucking 2 months ago. Woo! You have to get involved in the process. And to do that, you have to have the conversation. You have to know where everybody's at in the conversation. And if you don't know what the fuck you're running for. You don't know where your constituency is. You have no idea.
Or that, you know, work in hand with the government, the rise of essentially this administrative state that, and it was, you know, goes back to Wilsonian doctrine, this idea that universities and the academy would essentially borrow some of the sovereignty from our
Mike, you mean like jog?
Our government, and then be used to control, you know, the decisions of the government itself, even though they're of course not elected officials. This was part of the German idea that the regime should exist separate from elected government, and that so that science and enlightenment and reason should be separated from the you know, the muddy, grubby world of politics. And so that regime has become more and more powerful. It has also been amplified by many of these factors, but because so many people have decided
Coop Gaming, what's happening?
That it is not serving the people well, they're turning to candidates then, and again, this is both on the right and the left, that are actually in opposition to that regime. If you look at what happened in 2016, and then after that, you can see that the regime feels very threatened. This is one of the reasons that even though we had the social media amplification system, which arguably is still in place, they're doing everything they can to put the shackles and hammer down on anybody that really speaks out across these narratives when it comes to this, because the regime has the line of the regime, the inner party sets the truth, and that anything that stands in opposition to this must be rooted out, and any people, if they become rooted out because of this, must also be taken down. This, of course, leads to the arrest of Julian Assange. It leads to the current investigation on James O'Keefe. It leads to the demonization of Tulsi Gabbard.
James O'Keefe is a fucking moron. He's a fucking scam artist, dude. Don't go there, motherfucker. Your fucking stupid fucking dog whistles and your fucking shitty Oakley sunglasses. Get the fuck out of here. Come on, dude. What the fuck are you saying? Fucking grifter and a half right here. Grifter in a gray suit.
When she ran for president, many of these other voices out there, and the entire anti-war movement, by the way, any of these voices, Chelsea Manning, great example, any of these voices, right, that come out that say, I don't like what the regime is doing, are then destroyed, and they must thusly be destroyed because we're living through that era. So I don't necessarily think that it's all left-right. I mean, there certainly is a lot of that, but there's also a lot of this sort of up-down division that we're seeing as well.
So I want to get back to this question just quickly about the level of contempt that we feel for one another as a result of all this. I was reading a recent Brown and Stanford University study that reported that effective polarization, meaning the amount of negativity that a citizen feels towards political parties other than their own, has increased dramatically in the United States in the past 40 years. And I agree with you. I don't think that it's necessarily organically a political kind of division. I think that's being manufactured. But in the past 40 years, people are now reporting more contempt, more negativity towards people in the other party. So if you look at people in 1960, for example, 4% of Democrats and 4% of Republicans said they would be unhappy if their child chose to marry someone of the opposite political party. By 2019, that figure was 45% of Democrats and 35% of Republicans said they would be unhappy.
Dude, when your party's pushing a bunch of fucking racist bullshit, like, of course people are going to be upset. Like, if my daughter had got with a fucking libertarian or a Republican, I'd be losing my fucking shit right now. Like, no shit. Because what they're selling is fucking racist, anti-science bullshit. Like, what the fuck, dude? Hey, Holly Wars.
Happy if their child married outside of their political party. What are the factors specifically, if there are any factors like social media that are making this a uniquely contemptuous time for people with disagreements? What are those factors? Could we agree on what some of those are?
Well, I would say that we've known for a long time. I mean, if you guys read The Righteous Mind, Jonathan Haidt's book, that it's hype, but I like to call it.
I'm just saying, generally speaking, you'd have a lot. I think that you'd probably have a lot of questions. And I think a lot would probably go the other way. But, you know, like, I do think that because of what's being magnified by their own, like, home news networks and things like that, it does make it really hard to see another side to it. Like, you really have to, like, know people, you know, Koob Kami, I know. But I think that it's much harder, you know, because the instant connection is going to be to what their talking heads bring to the forefront. So even though there may not be as many people like that, because that's the perpetuation of thought by those that have access to the media and a broad range of outlets, that's what you're gonna see, and that becomes perception. Now, I've gotten to know a lot of people that are on the right that I think are good people. But if somebody told me out of nowhere, like, hey, you know, I would be like, oh shit, you know, I might have questions. You know, I'm going to ask questions.
Call him hate, because that's how it's spelled. If you read his book, that the left, like, has hated the right for a long time in this nation. And one of the unique things, and they've done this through surveys where, like, the left literally can't understand, like, the further left you are, the worse you are at guessing the values of right-wing people. But one of the things that's happened that's become interesting is now we have the right, like, hating them back. It used to be a situation where the left thought you were evil if you were on the right wing, and people on the right just thought you were wrong or stupid, and they would try to convince you. But now we're seeing, like, this almost, it's taken decades. We're seeing the right push back, and I don't know if that's due to social media. I don't know if it's due to the fact that, you know, for decades these people are telling you that
the right has never pushed back. What the fuck is he talking about? What about the mass right-wing demonstrations over integration of schools? I'm fucking baffled, like, that this revisionist history bullshit. It's so fucking inaccurate. Really?
they hate you, and you can only go for so long saying, oh, they're just ignorant, and now people are like, all right, I hate you back. But I think the right's polarization, or their more vitriol for the left, that 35% number is, it's still lower, but I think that's relatively new.
I think as well, a lot of this, to kind of use my theory of the regime on this is fomented, right? This is fomented on both sides to...
If BLM had burned down any federal buildings, I'd agree with you, but they found that that actually wasn't BLM. It was some interlopers posing. So it's just like the guy that was breaking out the windows in that auto parts store. He was not a part of the BLM stuff. They were there to fucking make them look bad. And there was an investigation about it. People got arrested for it.
To keep them pitted against each other to really sort of occlude what is actually happening in this country right now. So you'll see many times we've seen federal agencies or agents of national security teams go in and then implant informants in things like Black Lives Matter or other left-wing groups. You're starting to see it now in this Boogaloo movement.
What about the Trump supporters fucking beating the shit out of and killing BLM activists? Well, I mean, what do you want? Like, I'm not Antifa. I mean, I'm Antifa in theory, but I'm not a black bloc motherfucker. And that's another misconception. Not all Antifa are black bloc motherfuckers. Like, I mean, you're lumping a bunch of different people in together. You talk about how much Germany in their politics is all lumped together and all this shit, but you can't even get our fucking politics right, man. You can't even get our movements right. You're sitting here lumping everybody in together the same. What the fuck is the difference?
Which was, it seems like it was almost completely
Mr.
created
Nosbull.
by the federal government, as well as people that are more associated with these militia groups, these 3%ers, Oath Keepers, and various other groups that are associated with things that happened throughout 2020 and early 2021. And so this type of anger and polarization is fostered by the regime because they are seeking to push what's essentially known as a color revolution. Now, color revolution is something that, had you been in Eastern Europe, or if you had been following the events of the Arab Spring, you would see how different regimes or pockets of regimes or groupings of regimes are using these tactics to be able to achieve geopolitical primacy. You're seeing that. We saw it in Ukraine. You saw it across the Arab Spring. You've seen it. Really, pick a country in Eastern Europe. It's happened there probably a few times. The only difference is.
Unlike us guys, you are us guys, Arminius, as much as you want to be something else. You're in America, you're an American, you're dealing with the political climate here, not the one from the 1920s and 1930s. You're kind of stuck with what we got, man. What you got to do is find the party that most closely aligns to what you want to have happen, and that's the party that you fucking vote with. Until such a time as you can get your ideologies up high enough and get enough funding or support to be able to, I don't know, maybe start a successful third party. Haven't seen it happen yet, but good luck to you. I'm just going to say shit in one hand, wish in the other, and see which one fills up first.
These types of forces aren't really used in the West. And so through those instances, any one of these polarizations, and then specifically acts of violence, has to be filtered through the lens of the regime narrative. So whether it's the events of January 6th, whether it's the events of Kyle Rittenhouse in Kenosha, George Floyd, whatever it is, it's filtered through that narrative so that the regime can achieve its ends.
I feel like the regime has always done, if we look at it from the regime lens, I feel like that's an unsatisfactory explanation because the government has always done weird stuff. Whether we're talking Tuskegee with the experiments on black people and syphilis, whether we're talking the FBI informants that were embedded into people like the Black Panthers in the Civil Rights era, I think the government's always been up to kind of funny business, whether we're talking about MK Ultra. There's all sorts of different projects that the government has done, arguably some that have been worse in the past than what exists today. I feel like for a slightly less conspiratorial view, rather than regime versus the people, I think that something that happens, it's kind of in line, well, I guess obviously I favor my...
I love how kindly he just illustrates, like, you're talking about conspiracy theories, you fucking nut job.
My paradigm with the amplification of stuff is something that's happened is we have become hyper-nationalized in our political landscape, and we're kind of sold this illusion that there is a unifying Democratic Party and a unifying Republican Party, and that is absolutely not true. A Democrat that exists in West Virginia has absolutely nothing in common with a Democrat generally that exists in, like, California. And we have this issue where and it doesn't surprise me that people might view each other as worse, but that's because if I were to ask, like, if I were to ask a Republican in any of the Bible Belt, what do you think of when I say, like, Democrat? You're not actually thinking of another Democrat that might exist in your city or on your state legislature or your city council or whatever. You're thinking of AOC. You're thinking of the Justice Dems. You're thinking of President Biden. You're thinking of Obama. And then much the same if I ask a Democrat, like, oh, well, who are you thinking about? And they're thinking, like, Jim Jordan, or they're thinking Donald Trump, or they're thinking of, all of these national level Republicans. I think that when we kind of lose, I think that when we look at our unique political landscapes that exist on a local level, you're going to find a lot of overlap in values. If you go to a particular city election, it's pretty rare that you're going to have an ultra left-leaning socialist running against, like, a far-right Trump supporter. Usually there's going to be a lot of shared values in between the two of these people, because that's typically how local politics works. But I think when we become so nationalized in all of these conversations, we kind of forget, like, not to call anybody out, but like, who is on your state legislature, or who is your mayor, or who is your governor? Sometimes people don't even know, you know. But we sure can name the last thing that AOC tweeted, or the last fight that Ben Shapiro got in with some congressperson, because the national level politics is all we see. And when that is what you see, I think because we see the most extreme of that, you tend to think that the people of the opposite political party living near you embody the values of the most extreme figures you see from halfway across the country on Twitter or television.
I kind of want to add to something, Sean, that you said, which was, I know you said, you know, finally the right has said, I hate you back. And I do just, maybe it's semantics to some people, but to me, I would just like to, in my opinion, tweak that a little bit, which is, I think that you can only poke the bear for so long until the bear finally says, I'm done, right? So
Yeah, you know, don't poke the bear for so long. Heaven forbid you want equal rights for the LGBTQ community, equal rights, you know, maybe reparations for people of color and natives, you know. I mean, you know, we're just pushing it too far, you know. We're fucking with the white identity now, you know. We all got to be cis, white, fucking hetero, fucking normative motherfuckers who live in fucking $350,000 houses and fucking jerk off to dumpster porn when our wives are gone or some shit. What the fuck is she talking about?
I have seen, it has not been so much that you hate us and we hate you back, but it's just we have been disrespected for so long. We have been told that we are white supremacists, that we are this, that we are that.
Because you are. You do things indicative of that. You push policies that favor that. What the fuck are you talking about? If we broke it down on a policy level, that's what you've fucking done. That's what you've done. Nobody's poking the bear. They're trying to get their fucking just dues, just like you got yours. What the fuck is wrong with that?
That we are transphobic, that we are homophobic, all of the phobics for so long that you can only live like that for so long before you turn back and say, you know what, I'm kind of done. I just don't really care to live like this anymore. And I do think that it is an important distinction.
Yeah, so maybe stop being a fucking white supremacist and a fucking homophobic, and then, you know, the problem will be over. But that's not what we're going to talk about now. We're going to talk about your fucking white grievance bullshit, lady. Like, get the fuck out of here.
Because in my experience, I haven't seen that hatred coming from the right, but more so just, okay, I'm kind of tired of this. I'm done with the energy. I just don't want to play the game anymore.
Oh, for sure. And I do think a big driving factor is the emphasis on racial politics. Mm-hmm.
Most of the people on the left that I know, Arminius, are fighting for fucking decommodified housing. How is that fucking gentrification? I don't know what left you're talking about, dude. If you're talking about the neo-lib Democrats, I mean, you're in the wrong house for that, because that's not what I am. They're not left.
Obviously, race is very divisive, and no matter what most people say about how they don't mind being called racist at this point, it's something that bothers you because that's one of the worst things to call somebody. It's close. The close.
Well, then I got an idea. Don't be a fucking racist. Like, you know, this is what they're fucking crying about, being called a racist when they've said things that fucking allude to racist ideology or push policies that would otherwise be probably somewhat racist. But, you know, it's cool. Like, don't call them a racist. Don't call them what they are. We should just pretend that they didn't say that. And we'll all coexist equally and happily, and everything will be hunky-dory as they continue to try to fucking subvert some people's existence in this country while bolstering their own. You know, I don't know. It's, you know,
closest thing to it is calling somebody a pedophile. Like, that's how serious the allegation is. So ever since we've, like, the left has really, and you could track their mentions of white supremacy on Google Trends, ever since they've like ratcheted up that rhetoric, we've seen the response from the Republicans because they were always nasty. They always like hated George W. Bush. They would call him an idiot. They hated.
I hate this fucking, well, George W. Bush was a fucking idiot. George W. Bush was a fucking idiot. Even his dad said he was a fucking idiot. Like, come on. When your dad's calling you a fucking idiot and saying you destroyed the country, yeah.
Sarah Palin and all that, but we're like, whatever, that's politics. Like, you know, we understand. We don't like Hillary Clinton because she kills people. Like, we get it. Like, but once everybody became like,
you see the difference between reality and fucking conspiracy theories. Like, reality? George W. Bush was a fucking dumbass. Got us into a giant boondoggle of a war that we should have never been in so that he could fucking get Saddam Hussein back for his daddy. Hillary Clinton being accused of fucking having people killed. Of course, there's no evidence to this. It's just people regurgitating some bullshit they heard from some asshole online. Right? You know, there is a difference. And the fact that he's trying to equate these as the same fucking thing is the problem. They are not one in the same. One, there's no fucking evidence of. 0. There's no evidence of. The other was demonstrably so. That's the problem. That's what's so maddening about some of these people on the right, these talking heads. They can't even admit the fact that, yes, George W. Bush, by all accounts, was kind of a fucking idiot. They'll say it in private. They're not going to say it on stage. But they will say it in private. I've heard them.
Deplorable white supremacists and all that, and you just see this everywhere. And it's not the full left. Like, you know, progressives make up like 7% of the population, and like these are the people most likely to be ratcheting it up. But people just fall in line and they comply with that loud 7%. And I think that's led to the right seeing the left as that and realizing that even if I know intellectually you don't hate me on the left, you're willing to stand idle while my name gets dragged through the mud or my family's members' names gets dragged through the mud because you're not willing to call it out because we've...
Well, if you're a racist or a homophobe, your name is... See, this is white copium right here at its fucking worst. Oh my fucking God, dude. This is rage-worthy. Yes, I see why you wanted me to watch this one, Mike. This is fucking rage-worthy. These guys are fucking assholes. I'm sorry, they're fucking assholes. Total and complete fucking assholes. Cry me a fucking river that you got called racist for being racist. Cry me a fucking river. I don't fucking care. You fucking crybaby.
Like glorified the allegations of racism in this country. So I do think that has led to, you know, that is the poking of the bear, and that's where we went too far, or they went too far.
We would also probably be remiss, or I would probably be remiss if we didn't bring up the one area of polarization that's even larger than political right
Only if they're homophobic.
right now, and that has to do with the way that society is becoming polarized on the issue of COVID-19, specifically on vaccination status versus unvaccination status. And you've got people now within the federal regime that are coming...
Hey, Army Billy. How you doing tonight? Looks like you're doing good. Hung out with the momster today. Awesome.
Coming out and saying that if you are unvaccinated, you are the problem, you are scapegoated. Jacinda, the Prime Minister from New Zealand, was asked about this, and they said, are you creating a two-tier society where there is one rung of citizens that has less rights, right? They are second-class citizens with less rights than the people who have become vaccinated. And she said, yes. Yes, we are. We positively are doing this. And so whether or not your vaccination status is this or that, whatever, listen to your doctor, do your thing. But I'm not going to sit here, and I don't think any of us should sit here, and look at a country that becomes so incredibly polarized where we take a group of people, it is a smaller group of people, by the way, and then blame all the ills of society on them. This has been done throughout history when regimes become decrepit, when they feel threatened, and they come up with these scapegoat targets, and it never ends well. It always ends horribly.
I think there's something else to that, Jack. And actually, we talked about it on my show yesterday, which was, it was a comment that I had just gotten. And I hear this all the time in regards to COVID-19, which is the idea that someone had said, well, true patriots care more about public health than they do about individual freedom. And I hear that so often, is that people are like, you are not patriotic if you don't care about the common good. If you care about the common good, you will do this for your neighbor. You will wear the mask. You will get vaccinated. You will do all these things. And I really do hear that so often, that there are these two lines of thought that, like, well, you're not patriotic unless you put the greater good first. Even though when you look back at the collectivist mentality, that's never been what America has stood for. That's never been what America was founded on. And yet somehow here we are finding ourselves with these people who have been conditioned to...
There's never been collectivism in our country. There's never been collectivism in our country. I think she needs to go back and read the Constitution and the Federalist Papers. The whole idea about having a country made up of different states is a collectivist idea. It's very fucking nature. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
View their freedoms as selfish, and I think it's a really dangerous time.
I think we've absolutely been collectivists in the past. We literally had a draft where we forced young men who were 18 years old to go overseas and fight to the death in wars. I would say that we had an office of censorship around World War II, where we were literally disallowing people casting baseball games to talk about the weather because we didn't want, foreign enemies to have any sort of information coming into the United States. I think that there's always been like a healthy balance between, these are our private liberties, but as we tell our children, with, more freedoms comes more responsibilities. You want to drive, that's fine. You can't drink and drive. If you want to, stay out late, that's fine, but you've got to call and check in. Like, it's always been historically, whether we're talking to our children or our fellow countrymen, that with additional freedoms is always necessarily going to come additional responsibilities, because you just can't have an anarchist society with everybody running around doing as they will and saying, we have freedom, because freedom is really only as good.
Yes, preach, Mouselander, preach. Boo-hoo, oh my fucking god, you're part of the extremely small privileged minority, and being asked to show the slightest bit of empathy makes them cry victim. Yeah, it's fucking pathetic, isn't it?
Good as the people around you ensure it is, Like, you can have an ultimately free society that, at the end of the day, you don't have the ability to do anything inside. So whether that's a pandemic and you're immunocompromised and now you can't go anywhere because nobody wants to do anything to, take care of themselves or take care of you to make sure that you don't get sick, or, whether that's, driving on the road and other people are drunk driving because we decide, well, they can drunk drive, but if they get in an accident, that's when we're going to punish them. I think that we always accept some level of limits on our freedom. If we want to say also that there's like a two-tier system being created between the vaccinated and the non-vaccinated, I mean, I guess we can say that, but that system was created a long time ago. We've had that for a long time. In order to go to public schools, and most
That's
private
not
schools
true. That's completely not true.
Wait, do you require vaccinations to attend most schools?
Did they check a vaccination status when we got into this theater? When you went to a supermarket? When you went to?
I would argue going to school is more important than going to the theater.
Most states have exemptions.
This is Mott and Bailey, right? We're not talking about those vaccines. We're talking about this vaccine.
And I'm just saying, if you to utter the phrase, we're creating a two-tier system between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, that's already existing.
There's a crucial distinction.
It's actually happening.
Absolutely. You cannot go to public schools and most private schools unless you are vaccinated, and you have to show a record of that.
I'd like to just correct, but on top of that, most states in this.
Yeah, because we don't want people to die from fucking diseases that have gone defunct. I would really not like to get the fucking mumps. I would like my kid not to get the fucking measles, which can cause sterility in people. Like, for fuck's sake, guys, pull your fucking heads out of your collective assholes. I'm sorry. Pull your fucking heads out of your collective assholes. We're creating a two-tier system for vaccines. Yeah, you mean you have to get a shot? So that potentially your grandma doesn't die from your shitty ass fucking behavior? Going out and partying and fucking painting the town red and not wearing a mask and doing the whole shit? Because I guarantee these four are doing that. Fucking dumb, dude. Stupid fucking people.
This country offer a wide variety of exemptions for parents to fill out. I know because I do them. It's very easy. I go to my state's registrar, the Department of Health. I go fill out my information. They send me a form. I go get it notarized saying I don't want my children to be vaccinated for whatever reason I so choose, my personal conscience. I believe that it's New York and California who are the only ones who have done away with everything except medical, but medical still remains. So the idea that I can't.
One of the vaccines isn't even mRNA, so like that's not an excuse. And the one that's not has been tested for a long fucking time. And even the mRNA one started like 20 years ago. Like how much like study and research do we need? I mean, 20 fucking years we've been doing this. Yeah, right? I feel that, Mouselander.
can't send my kids to public school or private school unless they're vaccinated is absolutely untrue. I know because I do it.
There's an exemption process, though. My understanding for the COVID-19 vaccine as well, though. Yes, you're allowed to get tested, and you can show that you've been tested.
Many employers are not
though.
accepting that
Yeah,
exemption. But I have a question. Do you believe, Stephen, that you don't believe that there's an attempt to use vaccine status to divide us in this country? You don't think that's happening?
I think at this point, you could literally tell people to stop shitting in the streets, and Republicans will pull down their pants and run up and down and do it. I think that people are looking for divisions in any possible place you can find it. I guess as an American citizen, I think that we have access to a wonderful society, but there's going to be some buy-in to that society. Whether it triggers people or not, like paying taxes is part of your obligation to society. You know, being a good neighbor is part of your obligation to society. Taking the bare minimum steps to ensure that you're not transmitting a deadly disease over and over and over again to other people is like the bare minimum step you can take in society. I think it's a fair.
What does being a good neighbor mean, though? That means different things to different people, right? Like when you're saying,
that's what we vote on.
But when you're saying it's my responsibility, public health is my responsibility, it is not my responsibility that we have an obesity crisis in this nation. I have not forced people to go and make themselves.
Obesity is not contagious.
But it makes people more prone to getting COVID, which means
but
that
obesity itself is not contagious.
But if you have made yourself have comorbidities to something that is going around, how is that my responsibility?
I mean, we can talk about reasonable steps you can take to prevent one from getting sick. I don't know if I would say that like every single person.
But that wasn't your
needs to
argument.
live.
People don't take care of their own bodies.
I don't think we can say every single person has to live an optimally healthy life. Otherwise,
It doesn't matter if they take care of their own bodies. My cousin was a fucking marathon runner. She got COVID. She's on oxygen the rest of her life. I know people who have been perfectly fucking healthy their whole lives that have gotten COVID and ended up with long-term fucking after effects. Not only that, I've known healthy people that have fucking died from COVID. So stop saying that shit, dude. It's not just fucking fat, obese people or people with heart conditions dying from COVID. What the fuck is wrong with these people?
otherwise it's your responsibility.
Right, but that wasn't
when it comes to something like a vaccine, when it comes to something like a vaccine.
By the way, can you guys see why I brought up vaccines? Because like this was kind of, you know, we were kind of like just chilling up here, and then I was like, let's talk about something.
He wanted to make it interesting.
You know?
Actually, this I think goes to your point.
We are going to now
suddenly
speak of the vaccine. We are going to have a lively argument and discussion for your viewing pleasure.
Suddenly, it's very contentious.
Oh shit! Is this the German accent guy? What the fuck? Are we fucking serious right now?
Yeah,
okay.
I do have a point about that because you brought up the in order to go to public schools, and true, we require most kids. There are exceptions to get vaccinated for public schools, but what do we require them to get vaccinated for? Diseases that are either more contagious than COVID and diseases that are more deadly for children than COVID. Like we don't require flu shots every year for kids to go to public schools, and COVID for kids in that age is about as dangerous as the flu.
No, it's not. Studies are showing there is a huge childhood morbidity rate in these states where the children have not been vaccinated. Arkansas saw a fucking ton of that. Their hospitals got flooded with children like that. So it does happen. There is a propensity for kids to get sick and or die. Is it as frequently as say older people or people who are middle-aged? No. But it happens, and you know what? If it means saving one kid's life, isn't it fucking worth it? Isn't it worth it? Or do we just not give a fuck? Oh, you know what? It's only a few kids that are getting affected by it. So, fuck them, fuck those kids. We don't fucking need them. Weeding out the weak,
If you want to compare this to a smallpox vaccine, smallpox's fatality rate was 30%. It was a worldwide pandemic, or a worldwide plague on humanity. These two things are not comparable. So
I agree that we don't require flu shots, but if the flu was killing, 500,000 people in a year,
the flu kills more children than.
Hold on. The flu fatality rates are nowhere near the SARS-CoV-2.
He's talking about for children.
We're talking about children because you brought up schools.
But we don't get vaccinated just for children. I don't know why conservatives are so short-sighted when it comes to public health. You don't get shot just for the children. You get shot to protect their families, to protect their teachers, to protect other people in society. This is how vaccinations work. Vaccinations are not an individual protection measure. It is a societal epidemiological health prescription.
Just to get us back on subject for a second.
So
I'm curious, because we also.
I suppose that Washington shouldn't have done the whole mandatory smallpox inoculations either, should he? He should have just let the country die out from the get-go from smallpox. And that was like militarily mandated. They were going fucking door to door for that shit. Door to fucking door. Like, that's the founder of our fucking country. Don't give me this shit. Don't give me this fucking bullshit. Get the fuck out of here. Do your fucking history homework.
Seem to be, at least I thought we were in agreement on several things until we got to this very divisive issue of vaccines. But I'm just curious, do you believe that there's a concerted effort in this country to divide the populace along issues like race, for example, using race, for example, to divide us, using the vaccine to divide us, using partisanship, you know?
I mean, I think the division is a byproduct of other goals. I don't think the goal is explicitly like we're going to divide with this issue and focus on it. I think that people have issues that they care about a lot, and then people end up being divided on it. So whether we're talking about people on the left dividing people with the coronavirus or Republicans dividing people with abortion, I don't think anybody's goal is to divide somebody with a topic. It's just you have things you care a lot about, and then you push it, and those topics end up becoming divisive because people disagree with them.
Look, I think people's uninformed nature leads to bad policy and authoritarian policy. We've seen the polling that a bunch of people in this country think that the hospitalization rate for COVID-19 is over 50%, over 30%. So, like, people think that COVID sends you to the hospital like smallpox. I understand why they're pressuring their governments to pass regulations to treat it like smallpox.
Russ Doe had a column in the New York Times where he was saying that, you know, what if COVID was 10 times more deadly? And my response was like, well, yeah, then I'd be there with you, right? You know, that I would understand some of this stuff, and we could take those steps, right? If it was as deadly as smallpox, then yes, certainly we would be using much more drastic measures. But you know, when it comes to this, I find it very interesting that we argue more about the effects of the steps that we're going to be taking on this, rather than, you know, for me, I've been a big, you know, proponent of understanding where COVID came from, understanding this process, the NIH process, and looking into, you know, early January 2020, I was like one of the first guys in the country who was reading the Mandarin on various Chinese blogs, trying to figure out what the heck was going on in Wuhan, and then digging into the lab and everything else. And it's amazing to me how that, which really seems like something the country could unite on, and I don't mean to drive the conversation into this, that has been completely usurped by, instead, no, we're going to have these divisive mandates. And it's amazing to me that when I see Joe Biden, every time he announces a mandate, it's because he's trying to distract from something that's just happened. So Afghanistan...
Every time he announces a mandate, he announced the mandate one fucking time. Once.
Falls apart. He announces he's...
There are places you can still go and get the bubonic plague, Arminius. There are like recorded cases of it, I think, in South America. Like within the past 10 years.
Going to push nationwide mandates. Then he has a political loss. He's suffering badly in the polls. He announces
that... Oh yeah, Kelly did have one too, didn't it?
OSHA is going to fund, just this last week, right, is going to push the new rule. 49 pages, the thing comes out, everyone's going to be fined. And so everybody then goes and talks about the mandates. At the same time, you're seeing the ordering of vaccines.
Or how about bringing back leprosy? We'll bring back a good one. Let's bring back some leprosy.
Nations for children in New York State. And so it's looking at it again, like, because I do look at everything through the regime, not everything, but I look at a lot of this through the politics of, or the lens of regime politics, that you can really see that a lot of what the regime, and to your point, you know, I do think that this is something that a lot of people care about, but I can see that the way that the timing of these orders is really being pushed to help benefit the regime in terms of the larger narrative war.
I would also say that the idea that I am supposed to put my child at risk, because there is risk to both things, right? If you want to say there is risk that my child might be one of the few who gets COVID-19 and has some sort of long-term complications or, you know, passes away, there's risk there. There is also a risk when you are talking about a medicine, a drug that you are injecting into your body. And I just think the idea that I am supposed to put my child at risk for a stranger at the supermarket that I don't even know, I am beholden to some stranger in society more so than I am to my own family.
You're not putting your child at any more risk by your logic, because if you're saying that, there's the same chance of your daughter having an adverse reaction to the virus as there is dying from the virus by your rationale. So I'm not really seeing what the difference is. Get your fucking kids vaxxed, lady. Shut up.
Is absolutely preposterous.
I mean, you can play that on both sides, though. Maybe you think you don't want to put your child. I wouldn't want to put my child at risk being in a classroom with your child. I don't want my child to contract something.
Then stay home.
I don't want.
Then stay home.
No, but your child is the problem, not mine. Because I'm
it's
willing
not,
for
though.
my child
You
to take the
can't
minimum
spread a
number of
virus
steps
that you don't
necessary.
have.
I'm willing to have my child take the minimum steps necessary to make sure that they're safe and they protect their classmates as well. I'm guessing you're probably against children wearing masks too, or other types of.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, so
it's abusive.
It's abusive.
Yeah,
but the problem is,
my child never wore a mask.
If my child catches something or gets something because another student isn't taking the minimum preventative risks, and we know that children are pretty tenacious when it comes to the coronavirus, they're probably not going to die. They're probably not even going to get seriously ill. But if they bring that home to grandma and grandpa, and now grandma and grandpa die because you decided to fill out a bullshit exemption for your kid because you didn't want them to get a vaccination because of a stranger in a supermarket, like, that's just absolutely absurd.
Okay, so hold on.
Based Base, Destiny. She's going to try to fucking excuse this shit somehow. I don't have a responsibility to anybody but myself and my family.
So hold on. So here's the thing. If your mask works, if your vaccine works, if your child's vaccine works, you shouldn't have to worry about my child. My child is not a threat to you.
I don't.
If you believe in your science.
That doesn't. Are you fucking stupid? Are you fucking stupid? Everybody's fully aware that people can still get the virus after they've gotten the vaccine, which is why you're supposed to still wear a fucking mask after you get the vaccine. The only difference here is that you aren't going to fucking die from that virus. You may not even get hardly very sick from that virus. You know what is going to happen, though? You know what is going to happen? You're going to carry that virus. And you could infect somebody else with that virus. And that's the fucking bullshit. Just get the vax, wear your fucking mask. That's it. This isn't complicated. We were able to do it during the fucking 1912 flu or 1918 flu, and we can't fucking do that shit now? And we're supposed to be an evolved fucking society. That's an evolved society? No, we're a bunch of fucking morons. We're walking backwards. We're like going back into the age of idiocracy. This is going to be fucking ridiculous. Our next fucking president's going to be named Crunchwrap Supreme or some shit.
Then believe in your science. You're fine. And if you don't and you're worried about my child, what does that say?
I cannot understand how conservatives are so bad with probability. Absolutely blows my mind.
Why do you keep saying
if your seatbelt
conservatives?
works, why do you have an airbag? If your airbag works, why does your car crumple? If this all works, why do you have other drunk drivers? Like, you can make the dumbest case in one in the world, but this every single thing
not
that
at all
you do,
a great
it absolutely
analogy.
is completely one-to-one in comparison. The things that you do epidemiologically is not we're going to do this one thing and 100% prevent the virus, and if we don't, it's a failure. It's all the little steps that you take on the way. If everybody social distance and mask, you prevent the spread this much. If everybody did that and then got vaccinated, you prevent it this much. If everybody stays home, this is how it works. All of it is probabilistic. This idea that, well, you've got something that increases your probability by this percent, so now nobody has anything. It's the dumbest look at it.
So if you are living in a free society, if you choose to live in a free society and you choose to go into society, you are accepting the risk that you will get a transmissible disease every time.
If you choose to participate in society, you agree that you need to actually participate in the virus mitigation, in the mitigation of ills in society as well. That's why you pay taxes. That's why you obey laws. That's why you do all these things you do in society. That's why you are kind to your fucking neighbors. That's, these kinds of things. This is fucking basic. This is the problem with conservatives. These motherfuckers are so fucking bad faith, and they know it. They fucking know it. I bet you she's probably got vaccinated, and she's sitting up here arguing against it.
Time you exit your home. That is how a free society works. You will never vaccinate every virus out of the population. You will always have sickness, and we will always transmit diseases because that's just the way a free society.
Oh, really? Where's the smallpox breakouts at? I haven't seen a smallpox breakout in quite a while. What happened with that? I ain't seen any smallpox. I mean, we had basically eradicated measles and mumps until the whole anti-vax movement, and that fucking killed that shit. Savage782, thank you very much for the follow. Glad to have you with us. But I mean, listen, we know that this shit works. It's worked. It already has worked. It's worked throughout the history of our society. We've used inoculations for fucking ever. Like, this is nothing new. I don't know why they want to die on this hill. They say they're so patriotic and so pro-American, yet they're being the useful idiots to our fucking enemies. They are weakening our society's health and making us vulnerable to other countries. They're making our economy vulnerable to other countries. Because they won't just do the right fucking thing. This isn't hard. This is not rocket science. We've done this dance before. We've been here before. I mean, I don't know. Maybe this is what needs to happen. Maybe it's cleansing by attrition. Maybe all these right-wingers will anti-vax themselves out of existence because they fucking just managed to get themselves so damn fucking sick from this shit that, they, unfortunately all go by the wayside. I don't know. It's like a death cult, though. That's what it makes me think of. It makes me think of a fucking death cult.
Works. So if you are worried about what everyone else is transmitting, you are the one who should stay at home. Because we've always lived, we've always transmitted flu at the supermarket. No one's been worried about that. We've always transmitted diseases. No one's been worried about it.
We live in a free society. We live in a democratically elected representative government. So if most of the public decides that these mandates are indeed necessary for you to participate in society, then you are the one that is going to have to abide by what the public.
So what is the majority?
That's how it works. That's how it works. Democratically elected public. That's how it works.
How do you define rights? I'd like to know how you define rights. Like and this will actually get us back on topic a little bit. Where do rights come from? Because it sounds to me
there's a whole other conversation on do we believe rights come from God? Do we believe they come from government? Do we talk about positive rights?
But it sounds to me like you're saying it's within your right for the majority to dictate force against others. So, for example, if the majority of people say we should enslave people, then we should enslave people.
So
is that what you're saying?
we have edged out in our Constitution. There are going to be minimums, or there are going to be certain inalienable rights that we cannot take from other people. And that's up to the courts to decide for us to change the Constitution otherwise, right? You can say bodily autonomy you want, but vaccinations are required for children going to public schools, right?
We discussed
the point
that.
is that rights exist on paper, okay? It doesn't matter what right we talk about if we can't leave our house because we're worried about something, or if we can't go. Now, I'm not saying that the coronavirus is so bad you can never leave the house. I'm just saying that in order for society to function, we don't all work in this ultimately free way. We have a responsibility to other people around us. Conservatives should understand this the best because conservatives are the most local people that tend to participate locally in their churches, in their charities. They give more than liberals do. You guys should know this better than anyone else, and that in order for society to function, to be well lubricated, to not have a lot of friction, you have to have some minimum level of buy-in in terms of how you treat the people around you. One of the ways you treat people nice is by not volunteering as a bioterrorism weapon because you don't want to get vaccinated because of something that fucking Anderson Cooper said on CNN.
For someone who claims that conservatives have a hard time believing in science.
Oh man, Tim Pool, he's a pill and a half. Oh shit. Yeah, I believe it.
You seem to not understand the idea that no one can spread a virus that they don't have.
And also, my rights aren't.
I'm not a bioterrorist weapon by going to the grocery store.
What's up, Devil Dog? We're just dissecting this debate. This is a total fucking shit show.
Or if I don't have a virus, your assumption that everyone else you come into contact with, if they are not vaccinated, must have COVID is ridiculous.
No, but like my rights are not subject to your inability to assess risk properly. You're talking about people afraid to leave their homes because of the coronavirus. You're talking about children being afraid to go to school, or parents afraid for their children to go to school. The risk is near zero. Also, when Biden was announcing the vaccine mandates and what he was proposing, he said breakthrough cases were 1 in 5,000. Breakthrough hospitalizations, again from the president, were 1 in 160,000. I think 1 in 160,000 is not enough to infringe on other people's rights. Jack said it earlier. If COVID was 10 times, 20 times more deadly and more deadly for children, we'd be having a different conversation. But we need to
answer
you also
to this
wouldn't
is
have
simple.
to mandate it.
The answer to this is simple.
You wouldn't have to mandate it. People would go get it.
You vaccinate, everyone vaccinates. Then you will plug into Zuckerverse. And in Zuckerverse, we will...
Okay, this guy is fucking stupid. Like, why do we give these kinds of people fucking space on a stage about serious debate shit, like about serious issues? Like, you know, this is fucking clown show shit, man. Like, do any of these people actually believe in substantive, real argumentation about this shit? Because they're all fucking memeing. You know damn well she got vaccinated, and I bet her kids wear masks to school because they're forced to wear masks to school. I don't fucking care, dude.
All vaccinate each other multiple times a day. You'll be taking every new vaccine, then the pill comes out, the injections will continue until compliance has been achieved.
So, just to attempt to get us back on topic.
But there is a bigger question here, right? And I think we should separate the two over, like, are vaccines good versus should vaccines be mandated, right? Isn't that I mean, that's like two separate things, right?
Correct.
I think it boils down to, do you believe, we'll have time for questions in just 1 second, but do you believe that the government,
be very quiet,
people phrase
we
it
don't
this
want
way,
to hear from
do you believe that the government owns individuals or individuals own themselves? And is this a part of our American narrative that we've lost? Like, what did the founders intend when they talk about liberty? When I asked the first question on this panel, like, how do you define the founding principles if you were to explain them to a child? Like, what is America? What does it mean to be an American? Does anybody have an answer for that?
Well,
how do you define
there are no rights. Rights come from me if I give them to you. You're not allowed to have these silly things. You see?
When is he going to be fucking done with this shit, dude? He's giving me a fucking headache.
people.
There are no rights. The government has rights, and you are children who will obey what we tell you. We might make you think you have a right to vote for
Control Z that shit.
this approved candidate or that approved candidate, or have arguments from this approved source and that approved source asking this approved question or that approved question. But at the end of the day, you have nothing. This is silly.
Jack has the weirdest filibusters. I was gonna say, I think fundamentally, like the American identity, like we should all have an understanding of what like the principles of America mean. Like I want to move past that. I think fundamentally what separates Americans from other peoples in other nations around the world is that we have like an optimistic mindset, and this is in part due to our structure of government. Like people always say, we're the first nation to put freedom of religion in the Constitution. We're also the first nation to put intellectual property rights in the Constitution, because the idea of America is that if you invent it, you own it, you take it as far as you can take it, because it's your adventure. And we see the American optimism in different aspects of our lives. Go watch the ending of a British sitcom. The joke is always on the main character. American sitcoms always uplift the main character. This is because fundamentally we're an optimistic people, and we shouldn't lose the fact that we're an optimistic people. The Hollywood ending, when Hollywood used to reflect our values more, is a thing because...
I hate the term reflect American values, because he's assuming that because those are his values, that those are American values. That's where I think the problem is like we got to stop trying to own America and say it's just mine and my values dictate what America is. My values dictate what it means to be American. That's not the case. That's not it. He's missing the fucking point. Society and culture changes over time. It evolves. The main problem is he's not ready to evolve. And to put it simply, a good measure of intelligence is someone's adaptability. And the problem with a lot of these guys is they have no adaptability for the evolution of thought or the evolution of culture. And they're going to ultimately get left behind. Because simply said, we are moving in a different direction. 50s Americana ain't a fucking thing anymore, no matter how much you want to bring it back. It's not going to happen. So quit fighting for it. Start adapting to the world that we're in now. Get over your fucking self. But no, he doesn't get to decide what American values are because that seems to be what he likes.
That is reflective of our American values, that we want the hero to win. We want, like, we're rooting for good over evil, not to make it so dramatic like that.
But who says that? You don't think other countries feel the same way, that they root for good over evil? You think they're over there rooting for evil over good? You think that's what it's about? Like, that's what I'm talking about. This is what's wrong with a lot of these guys. It's that kind of framing. Because all they're doing, they are othering other countries. They're othering people with differing thoughts from their own in this own country. It's such a fatal flaw of logic. I fucking can't stand it. And every time I hear somebody go on about, oh, well, you know, they're not representing American values. Well, motherfucker, neither are you. You know, if you want to look at it that way. To me, you're not representing American values. And that's what I would turn on its head for these guys, is I'd be like, well, I honestly don't feel like you're representing American values. I think that you're representing values of the past, but you're not representing where the American culture is right now. You haven't adjusted with the Overton window, buddy. You're a fucking bygone sign of the past. Enjoy it.
That's not the same in other nations, and I see us becoming more cynical, less optimistic, talking about subversive things like national divorce, just giving up, packing it in, dividing up the country, as if that's not going to lead to a civil war. So we got to hold on to that optimistic ideal, because that's what America is. It's the adventure, not the result.
There's a great kind of like it's one of those memes that's out there, and it's it's talking about the differences in literature. So for different societies, and so the stereotypical American, it's like, I will die for liberty, right? And then it's got the British, British literature, I will die for honor, and then the French, of course, I will die for love, and then the Russian is like, I will die, and it's sort of this like
again. He is generalizing like an entire fucking populace of people like this. It doesn't make the argument stick. I'm sorry, this doesn't make the argument stick for me. It makes him sound like an uneducated asshole. And from the sounds of it, the guy knows Mandarin, so he can't be all that fucking stupid. But what he's illustrating right here is a stupid, uneducated ideology about how the rest of the fucking world works. You know, like, what the fuck do you want, dude? Like, you can't generalize a populace like that, and I'm sure they don't generalize themselves like that.
Very cynical, very Eastern, kind of thinking. And, I do feel, though, that we have lost kind of that American sort of sense of, if I have liberty, it's not just liberty for, the sake of being able to do whatever I feel like. It's liberty, what you say, to achieve those optimistic goals, to achieve those optimistic ends, because we don't want to be stuck in the pod eating the bugs. We want to be adventurous and take risks. If, everyone here, right, unless you're native, your parents came, or if you are native, if you go back, that your parents came or your ancestors came on a dangerous and arduous voyage to get here. So we were self-selected to be part of this experiment, over time. And I think we all do come from that stock. And so adventure seeking, we're in Texas, right? This is the home.
Oh, this guy's straight up a fucking nationalist. Like, he's probably a civic nationalist. I'd bet money on it. I would bet fucking money on it.
The cowboy, right? What is the more American stereotypical archetype than the cowboy, riding out with, the 10-gallon hat and being on the range? This is the American figure. Not like I'm from Philadelphia, I'm not a cowboy. But, that there is, a huge part of the American mythos that's tied up in that. And it's a figure that people strive to kind of emulate. And I think that we have lost, getting back to the original question, we have lost that as a country, totally lost that as a country.
I will say, just as a quick note, that your go-to example for like American values was what came from Mexican cowboys. I think that's kind of funny. But regardless of that, I think that we talk a lot about liberty.
They're called caballeros.
In terms of what are we guaranteed on paper? What can we do on paper? I wish that the conversation would move past that, because it is so unbelievably boring to hear about how much opportunity you have on paper. You don't actually have the opportunity in real life. Like, it's when you can go to so many different countries across Europe and people have access to education, they have access to healthcare, they might have to wait in line for it, but they get it. When they have access to like actual opportunity, and then we brag, well, in the United States, you could go from selling crack to, being the CEO of a major company. I find those conversations wholly unsatisfying. I wish that we would talk more about how do we actually ensure that people have actual real access to opportunity, rather than jerking ourselves off about, like, words on paper that don't mean much for a lot of the American public right now. We talk about how the public is, like, in the United States, generally optimistic, and then, we try to use, like, British cynicism to say they want evil to win over good. I don't know if I agree with that. But, I mean, if you want to look for optimism, look at, like, the millennial crowd that came up after one of the worst recessions in U.S. history. Or look at people right now that can't afford to move to another city to get a job. Or look at people that can't afford to go to college. Or look at people that feel like they have to live with their parents until they're 30 years old. I think that we have problems in this country that go past just the wording in the Constitution, and it seems like we're unwilling to come together to acknowledge that reality from the left and right, and actually, like, work to fix those problems.
I would say I think that we would acknowledge that there are problems that exist. I think that we would just disagree on the reason for the problem is, I think, the issue. I mean, I agree. I think it's... when my kids get that old, I sure as hell don't want them living with me, right? Like, I understand the problem of millennials having to live with their parents, but why is that? I would argue that we have a generation of people growing up who are entitled, who don't understand how to spend money.
This debate's not as fun as the last debate, am I right?
Who don't understand financial responsibility, and that those are the reasons driving what you just mentioned, right?
Where do they get those values
well,
from?
I'm not done, but...
This debate is fucking crazy. Who the fuck just said that? Was that in the video? No, this debate is fucking painful.
But as you're about to do, you would argue that it's something different, right? But what I'm saying is, I don't think that we disagree that there's a problem. We disagree on the root cause of the problem.
I just want to point out that one person clapped for there is no opportunity, and I found that hilarious.
I think you're right, though, when you say that it's a knock on conservatives, and I think it's a good one. Like, I give you credit for saying it. That conservatives will just kind of like be in this sort of like you're stuck in one of those C++ routines. If you know anything about coding, where you're just like the Constitution over and over. Whereas for huge swaths of the country, they're saying, look, my job went overseas and my town died because the factory closed, and I don't know what I'm going to do to feed my family, and this town is like falling apart. And so, you telling me, hey, the Constitution, bro, right? It doesn't really do much to help me and help my family. Or, if you're younger, it doesn't really help my prospects. And you talked about millennials as well. And I think that, as someone, I was born in 84, so we're sort of like the elder millennial, centennial kind of thing. And, you look at...
I don't think, and you know what, this bullshit about millennials being lazy and entitled, millennials are some of the hardest working motherfuckers I've ever fucking met in my life, dude. They bust their fucking ass, dude, and they bust their ass for next to no money. A lot of them are fucking working 2 jobs or side hustling it, or fucking back before like weed was legal in a lot of places. A lot of them were fucking having to sell weed and shit. Dude, they are fucking hustling, dude. And this pisses me the fuck off that they keep talking about this generation like they're fucking lazy when they work twice as hard for half the fucking money. They're paying 3 times the amount to go to school. They're getting less subsidies for fucking education. When these motherfuckers are from the generation that ripped the fucking ladder out from under them once they climbed up it. And you know what? None of these people are even old enough not to be millennials, I'd say, except for the older lady like in the middle. I guarantee that they're all within a few years of being fucking millennials anyways. So this dog whistle fucking millennial bullshit pisses me the fuck off to no end because it is so incredibly inaccurate.
If you came of age during, the financial crisis, like you were in debt, you were not getting a job. Basically, a lot of people then went back to school. They continued to get more into debt, and a lot of this stuff was driven by insane speculation on Wall Street, which was, of course, provided for them by the government. Nobody went to jail for any of this stuff. And the way that people decided to fix the system was to take away, strip ownership away from, millennials, Zoomers, and the rest of it, and to say, well, maybe home ownership isn't something. No, home ownership, of course, was what was the traditional. We talk about the American archetype being the cowboy, but what is the American dream? Right? The American dream used to be owning your own home. This was like the synonymous thing everyone was told, and that the path was laid out. Go to school, get your bachelor's degree, get a job, get a wife, have some kids, boom, there's your house, you're good to go, right? That's totally been broken, and it's been broken for a long time, and a lot of Republicans are running around thinking it's still the 1980s.
Koob, Kimmy, do you think that you're lazy? Because you are a millennial. I would venture to say you probably work your fucking ass off. Yeah, I'm waiting for it, right? It wouldn't surprise me. See? You're a millennial. You worked your ass off. I guarantee you a lot of other people did too, man. Maybe they didn't have all the advantages of being able to go to, college and university and all that. But, they're working their ass off too. A lot of them, blue collar workers and shit. These young kids, dude, I'm telling you, I've had some people come out and do some work on my house recently. And they're these young technicians. These guys are, they're definitely millennials. And dude, you can tell by looking at their hands, these motherfuckers work their ass off. They got calluses and shit. They're putting in time and putting in hours, showing up fucking sweaty and dirty, I mean, I give it up to millennials, man. They got to hustle. Things move a lot quicker now. And there's just a need to, you have to be able to keep up. And they do a fucking great job, man. Hustlers, man. Hustlers.
Using these boring, I agree with you, boring arguments and not talking about what's actually happening, because you see the same financial institutions and the same government institutions coming in and saying the problem with all of this was those stupid people thinking that they could own their own homes. We need to take that away from them. We need to take ownership away from them, take away the ability for them to build that generational wealth that they could actually then use, to seek. You talk about opportunities, but you're exactly right that there's so many challenges that have been put in place by this system, this corrupt system, that's preventing people from actually achieving any of these ends that we'd really like for there to be. But it isn't just their beliefs, and it isn't just not understanding the Constitution. It's actual huge structural problems in our country.
Look, I would agree that there are problems in the country, but the reason I'm emphasizing that America is about the adventure, and I didn't say Constitution, bro. I'm just saying, I specifically didn't do that.
But I didn't
I feel sympathetic for a lot of small town America, and there are some instances where small town America has fallen apart not due to circumstances not their own. I mean, the fact that we allowed pain pills to flood this nation and then cut them off, and that led to disaster.
Thanks, Frank Luntz.
Yeah, everybody understands that, but we have to also understand that the reason the Rust Belt existed, all those areas had manufacturing, is not because it was ordained by God that manufacturing would be there. It's because they had access to waterways, and it was expensive as hell to transport anything in this country or anywhere by ground transportation. If you were to ship a product from Pittsburgh to New York, which is only 300 miles over ground, you would send it on rivers, down to the Mississippi, out of the port of New Orleans, up the East Coast, into New York's port. So what happened in the 70s was not a giant conspiracy. It was that somebody invented two things. One, ground transportation got less expensive. There was containerization, so you could ship stuff over large portions of the country. And two, we invented air conditioning, which is awesome. The reason we're all here in Texas is because of air conditioning. You know what else was allowed to come to Texas because of air conditioning? Manufacturing. This is why, like, the death of Michigan coincides not with the rise of these foreign auto companies, although that did play a part. Competition is a real thing, but it coincides with the rise of Auto Alley in South Carolina. So we can talk about like restoring Michigan and restoring all of these like different places, but in reality, the major problems that they have are problems of them passing laws based on their natural advantages that no longer exist anymore, and people should move when the jobs move. Like, there is too much complacency in this country. Like, it's just a fact.
I think there's also an issue, too. When we talk about some of the older values that were sold, I think to some extent we have to acknowledge that as we continue to grow as a country, it's not going to be possible to do these things. You know, if you want to buy a house and have a family and be able to afford all of that off of a single job today, people will tell you it's impossible, but it's totally possible. You just have to move to Montana or Wyoming to do it. You're not going to be able to go to LA. You're not going to be able to go to New York. You're not going to be able to go to Miami. You're not going to be able to go to San Francisco and have the single family home off the one job and the mom at home staying with the kids, because it's just not affordable. It's not possible. We have so many people that live in this country today and so many people that want to move into cities. If you're trying to sell them simultaneously this idea that they can have the single family home and the white picket fence while also living in the most economically prosperous areas in the United States, it's a physics problem. You just can't do it.
No. Move to Houston if you want to do that. It's one of the fastest growing cities in the United States of America, and incomes grow faster than the cost of living up until they had a bunch of transplants from New Orleans, but even that is correcting. The reason why is because Houston has no zoning regulations. So if you want to live next to a parking lot in your cul-de-sac, like, that's totally dope. You can see those images online. But also,
how about we just decommodify housing and make sure that everyone's got a home and call it a fucking day? That's what I'm thinking would work. But, you know, who the fuck would want to do that? You know, we have more vacant homes in this country than we have homeless people. But to put them in it is somehow a travesty. I'm confused about that one. Oh.
Dallas-Fort Worth area is very inexpensive because they have virtually no zoning regulations. Like, the reason you can't afford to live in San Francisco or New York, and I live in New York and I can't afford to live there, is because of zoning regulations, it's because of open space laws, all of these restrictions that people who live there are imposing on people who could move there because they want to have a nice little bit of scenery that they can look at. Well, I'm a capitalist. If you want scenery, buy that property that has the scenery and you pay for it. Don't vote to keep future generations out. Like, that is a complete violation of our rights to due process and equal protection under the law, that just because you showed up first, you can vote to ban.
He is talking out of his ass. This has nothing with the right to due process or equal protection under the law. That is the biggest bunch of fucking bullshit I've heard in my life. Like, that makes no fucking sense. You understand? Like, what he's saying, like, makes zero fucking sense. This has nothing to do with being prosecuted. Those are terms you use for prosecution and litigation. This is not that. This was the voters, the people of the city decided that these were going to be these areas. Like, this type of shit is maddening, because what he is telling you is that he doesn't believe in the democracy of that area because the democracy of that area doesn't suit his desires. Right? Well, how about instead of saying, this democracy is fucking violating my rights, you say, well, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to try to get the laws changed, and I'm going to go participate in my city council, or I'm going to go participate in the zoning board, or try to get on the zoning board and try to do something to make a change. No, he's sitting up here talking out his ass, not understanding what the fuck he's talking about, like a goddamn fucking moron, and people are going to fucking listen to him and buy into it and eat it the fuck up.
And these other people. But yeah, if you want to move to a big growing city, Houston is the one.
I think
I mean Dallas. Dallas, Fort Worth.
Go Cowboys.
Found the Dallas, yeah.
You'll have to get your passport from me.
Yeah, that got more of a boo than the Eagles thing.
So I've got a final question, then we're going to go to a Q&A. And this brings up something you've mentioned, Sean. Comedian Sarah Silverman recently has talked about the possibility of a national divorce. It's a phrase that I'm hearing more in popular culture in the past 6 months. And we're sitting here in the great state of Texas, which has a growing favorability rate for the Texit movement. My question is, do you think we're at a place where the political and cultural divide is so great that it would be better to have an amicable parting of ways? And make your case to me either way, because my mind is not yet made up.
Listen, there's no such thing as an amicable parting of ways. That's live action role playing. Stop doing it. And if you think there is, please draw me the map of how we divide up the Mississippi River, because international trade still requires water-based transportation. So show me your map of the United States where the coasts are given to the left and the interior has to use the network of rivers to go to the Mississippi to get out of the port of New Orleans, that's going to make sense and not lead to a civil war. It's nonsense, it's subversive, and I'm not in for it.
Yeah, I have two really quick takes on the the national divorce thing. Number one is that we're probably not going to get a national divorce. We'll have more like a national separation. Like, we're still living under the same roof for the sake of the normies, but we're sleeping in separate bedrooms, we're dating other people. It's just but we got to stay together for the sake of the normies. So we don't go down that road. But then number two is that I find it very interesting, just from sociological perspective, that every single person I see who's totally for a national divorce, I'm definitely not one of them, but they're all Gen Xers. And it's like divorce is the answer for everything for Gen X, right? Just get divorced, man. Just walk, bro. Just get out of there. And it's like, it's such a Gen X thing. And so what's interesting is that, as that sort of cusp, centennial generation, it's sort of like, we have we're not quite as, what is it? We still have like youthful hope in the sort of elder millennial area, but we also but we don't get the cynicism and the jadedness of Gen X.
I think if I were to imagine that you said amicable, if I were to imagine that it could be amicable, which I agree with Sean, I don't think that it could be when you're like really looking at the details and the logistics of it. There are days where I wake up and I say, I'm really tired of being hated. I'm really tired of being told I'm a bioterrorist threat. I'm really tired of my children being told that they're a bioterrorist threat.
So I got an idea. Go get a vaccine, wear a fucking mask, and stop being a fucking asshole.
I'd really love to live with my own people, and I would love that. But I think when you look at the logistics of it, I'm just not sure that it's possible. I will say, when you mentioned Texit, I did see my friend Chad Prather. I know he's coming up later. I would just like to say he is running for governor. And if you want to know about Texit, you should ask him more about that. But I don't know how possible it is, but I will admit, in my weaker moments, there are days where I'm like, I'm just kind of done being hated. I would much prefer rejoining with the people who believe in the foundational principles of this country.
I think it's LARPing cringe. I think most people up here seem it's LARPing, live action roleplay. You like pretend it's not gonna happen. Logistically, it doesn't make any sense. I haven't seen people talking about it seriously, but I'd be curious what those maps look like too, because I feel like people miss that one of the big divides in this country. It's really not so much red states and blue states, although those exist, but it's like blue cities and red rural areas. And I think that when that's your largest divide, I don't even know how you'd go about cutting up the map to figure out like who would be in which area and how you. It seems completely impossible.
We also have quite a division between like people who can defend themselves and people who can't. So people who can defend themselves, and we've seen this historically throughout cultures, will tend to think freely because they don't they're not seeking consensus. So if they're saying something, it's, am I saying this because it is true, versus if you're someone who can't defend yourself, you're thinking, can I say this because it will be accepted by the collective?
And if you want to wrestle more local control, I know you have to go to questions, then put that energy into repealing the 17th Amendment. Most of the problems in our country that we're all concerned about like power transfer to the federal government, are due to the fact that we directly elect our senators and their federal entities. There's a reason all these court nominees were confirmed by the state's representative senates, because the state legislatures used to send the senators. It's because the courts are meant to adjudicate disputes between the states and the federal government. So you have the president, an agent of the federal government, appoint and confirmed by the senators, who are agents of the states. We don't have that, and we wonder why power.
He just said that he doesn't want you to be able to vote for your senator. That's what he just said. This guy is like an anti-democratic piece of shit.
Trickling up.
He's an anti-democratic piece of shit. He fucking hates the democracy in the city that he's in because they won't do what he wants, because the people who fucking voted didn't vote for what he wants. And then he wants to take the power out of the fucking hands of the people to vote for their senators? Oh, fucking hell no. Get the fuck out of here, you clown.
Up to the federal government. We removed a major check and balance in our federal government, and we pretend like, I wonder why things are going that way.
I mean, that's really what I mean by national separation. Empower the states. National separation, it also used to be called federalism, which is something we had in this country.
We're going to go to Q&A, but I'm going to ask one quick question. You have 10 seconds, Stephen. What is the what is the unifying narrative for this country if we are going to stay together?
I have no idea. I don't think there is a unifying narrative for the United States.
Let's start with questions.
Well, on behalf of all the Gen Xers, I am not jaded. Very excited to be here. I have a Built Bar wrapper. I wanted to give it to you, Sarah, but I ate it. Sorry about that. Just to get back to the most contentious thing, because I really see it in Dallas, and I'm from California, dividing us is how can you, Sarah, and Steve, is it Steve? Be together, live together, commune together when you do not want to get the vax and will not get the vax, and your children won't, and they won't wear the masks, and you seriously believe that it's a major health issue and that you're a bioterrorist. How do you get that to work?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Stephen would have a different answer than I would, but I would argue that that's just how we've been living in society this whole time, and it should work no differently than we've been living in society this entire time. We all make different choices for our own bodies. We all can make those choices. We all have the ability to make those choices, and I'm not going to judge someone for getting the vaccine. I don't think anyone should judge me for not getting the vaccine because, again, we live in a society where risk of transmitting disease is literally always going to be 100%. We are always going to transmit diseases. I'm willing to understand that and accept the risks. If someone else isn't willing to understand that and accept the risks, there's only so much I can do. So I'm happy to live with people who do or don't or whatever. In fact, I don't care to know their medical status. And I think that that's the problem, is that you have one side of the aisle who says, I actually don't really care about your medical privacy. I believe that that should stay private. And then there's one side of the aisle who, again, thinks that I am a bioterrorist threat. So I hope he has a great answer for how we can come together, because I would love to hear it.
So I'm absolutely judgmental, very much so, people that I disagree with. However, in the United States, you have two options, basically. So we live in a democracy. I've said this over and over again. I'll continue to say it. I can push for the things that I believe in, and I can hope that those policies are popular enough to get elected. If the ones that I agree with don't get enacted, I have two options. I either abide by it, and you do it, and there are policies that I disagree with, and you abide by it, and that's how it goes. Or you take your child out, or you remove yourself from whatever situation it is that you don't agree with. If I think that the way that speed limits are done in a way that I don't agree with, then stop driving. Or if you think that the way, if I felt very strongly about vaccine mandates for children and they weren't mandated, then you take your child out of school and you do homeschooling, right?
Well, would you agree, though, that if we had, like what Sean and I are saying, that if we had more empowered states and that it wasn't a federal thing, that, if there were a state law that said that, and, go with the moving, that, hey, I want to live in a state where my policies are more accepted versus coming to a place like Texas or, wherever, like Texas versus California kind of question. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, states have a right. I mean, it has to be decided on a legal battle. I don't know where the rights of the states end and the federal governments begin when it comes to matters of public health or whatnot. But I mean, that's something that the courts fight about. But yeah, I mean, some states have different laws for different things, and obviously you respect the different laws of the different states depending on where you live.
I think it's fucking asinine that these people are literally talking about letting state legislators appoint the senators. It's literally one of the very few checks that the people have when districts are gerrymandered so fucking bad in their states that they can't otherwise get the state legislators that would actually represent them into office. Your senators, though, because it's a statewide election, does allow for that. It lets the people speak as a preponderance of the whole, and that's what's important about that. That's why it fucking matters. These guys love the states' rights, though, because what states' rights allowed people to do is fucking subvert federal law, do whatever the fuck they want, like Jim Crow laws, shit like that. So this is just a perpetuation of that. Don't ever let anybody tell you that this shit has gone away, because these are all people, these are the characters that are trying to bring all that shit back about. I'm sure that they would love to make a second class of worker too. Don't think they aren't thinking about it.
I believe the precedent that's often cited for why the vaccine mandates are constitutional is a state vaccine mandate.
Yeah. It is. Yeah.
The central principle is consent of the governed. That's the most important phrase. Consent of the governed, that's the most important phrase in the Declaration of Independence. That's the basis of the Constitution. It requires accountability, which nobody out here, whether you're left or right, is actually seeing in our government. And with accountability, you get credibility, which also is what's lacking with regard to our government. And nobody out here actually thinks that the government gives a damn what we think. The mandate was not part of the last presidential election. Nobody ran on it. Nobody voted for it. So my question is, can y'all agree that consent of the governed and the rules that we play by is actually the way to get back to where we need to be?
Yeah, I mean, I would say you absolutely do consent. Every single decree of the United States government is not voted on by direct democracy. We vote for people that represent us, and then we hope that they enact whatever agenda that we agree with. If we don't, then you go and you vote them out next legislative session. But the idea that just because the president is enacting something or something comes from Congress that we don't directly vote on, it's not the will of the people, I think that betrays a misunderstanding of how our federal government is supposed to work.
Yeah, I would actually agree. I would agree with that to a certain extent. The idea that if something is not in a campaign or in a platform, therefore you didn't consent to it. It's like, no, we do have a representative republic. So you send representatives for a period of time. They don't have to tell you literally everything they do. They should, but you have the opportunity to punish them at the ballot box. However, we have a system where supposedly, allegedly, theoretically, the legislature makes laws, and the president shouldn't be able to look at an OSHA regulation that has to do with people wearing hard hats and say that that applies to a national vaccine mandate. So
you stupid people.
So we don't
think you have rights again. You have none. You have nothing. We'll mandate everything for you from now on.
Every time he does this, I fucking lose more and more respect for him, because it's like, number one, it's not fucking funny. It's just not. He's like, I'm sorry, guys, right-wing humor, I don't think you guys are going to nail it. He's not fucking funny. And, like, the insinuation is pretty fucking gross, dude. Like, comparing people, because he's obviously trying to make a comparison to fucking Nazis without saying it. I think he's very clever in that approach because it gives him some fucking, what do you want to call it? It gives him some deniability in it, you know. But that's exactly what he's doing. It's nationalist as well, you know. So it's total fucking douchebag mode. Like, it doesn't give me one bit of respect for him. And if he wants to say something and he wants to win people over, I don't think this is the way you do it. I just don't. Like, I would be more inclined to maybe hear out what he has to say if he would actually fucking stop with this bullshit. This is horrible debate tactic.
This is how it goes.
By the way, just to add to Sean's point, these are, and it's not just the OSHA regulation, right? It's also the CDC being used as another arm to.
Well, and that nationalism is to the extent that you're mocking other countries. I think that's pretty fucking shitty. Like, I don't think that shows us to be a good fucking world citizen if we can't at least fucking acknowledge other countries for what they are. I mean, like, you don't need to do that shit. It's fucking dumb, dude. I fucking hate that shit.
Enforce the eviction moratorium. I mean, we're seeing these departments being abused, and admittedly, the Biden administration already said, yeah, this really isn't legal. We really shouldn't be doing this, but we're going to do it anyway. So, I mean, I would agree with you, Sean. I think, like, if we were to get back to the actual system that we were supposed to have with checks and balances and the legislature working as it's supposed to, then I think that would be way better than the system we have now, which is clearly an abuse of power.
I mean, we say abuse, but it's a conservative court right now. If you think that it's being abused, you challenge it legislatively. If the Supreme Court upholds it, then maybe these federal institutions had more power than we knew originally. Or maybe we should vote in Congress to remove some of the powers that are delegated to them. There's a great deal of deference given to executive agencies when it comes to how they.
By the way, homeless people are not happy being homeless. There you go.
Want to implement or enact their particular laws, maybe that could be scaled back on. But I don't like the idea of saying that, like, it's illegally used or it's not really legal. It's like, I mean, if you don't like it, you have a Supreme Court that is conservative. You can challenge it.
Right. Unfortunately, a Supreme Court case doesn't go there overnight. Right, like it takes time. Right, it takes time. I mean, I don't disagree with you, but there's not always an immediate fix.
A lot of the lefties, when they were against the wars, would talk about how the war wasn't declared and the president shouldn't just be able to do this, that, and the other. I agree with that in principle. Like, you can't transfer your duties to another branch of the government. That's not how checks and balances work. And the Supreme Court did shut down the eviction moratorium twice. Once they were like, you know what, we'll give Biden a little break. So it was a soft shutdown, and then he took advantage of that to expand it again. And he knew he had no authority, he admitted it, he did it anyway.
All right. This question is for Destiny, Steven.
But he was playing the game, right? Just like Trump played the game. I don't see any fucking difference. Like, at least what he was doing kept some people fucking off the streets for a little while during the midst of this pandemic. He was doing everything he could, since he had an obstructionist Congress that won't work with him for the betterment of our whole society. They want to play fucking politics. They want to fucking create these divisions. And I'm telling you, I believe that the division in this country starts at the very top. The fucking fish rots from the head down. And I honestly, when I say the top, I don't mean the president. I mean the people that have been in Congress for fucking ever that are causing these divisions. I mean the fucking nutsos that fucking are flanking both sides to the extreme to where they can't even fucking have a normal civil conversation because you've got some dude fucking screaming at the top of his lungs the whole time somebody's trying to speak. Like, I don't know how you fucking reconcile that when the people, our leaders, are more divided, I think, than most of us are. And I think they're just doing it for clicks. We have like Facebook politicians now. That's what it feels like. It feels like they're all just fucking, you know, out for this social media fucking click, you know, and it's like, who fucking, like, do you actually care about your fucking job, or is it just about whether or not you're going to get elected next time?
Whichever you prefer. Do you believe that people on the right, including some of the people on this panel, actually believe that the left is goading them into extremism? Or do you think that they're intentionally lying to gaslight moderates and the left?
One of the hugest problems, what? Yeah, true, you are, am I right? I think it is absolutely fucking horrible how crazy everybody is on different sides of the political aisle. I will, unless I have a really good reason to believe so, I will never think that somebody is acting in some malicious or horrible manner. Like, I think that you probably genuinely do believe that you're doing what's best for your family and your children. I would hope so.
I know I am.
And I would assume the same of any conservative. I think that people on the left and people on the right all too often get into these mindsets where they're very quick to demonize or frame how other people are acting in the very worst of ways. But, I mean, like, that's just the nature, unfortunately, of the political landscape.
You see this, Sean? You cannot simply run around calling everyone a pedophile.
Yeah, my question is actually for actual Justice Warrior.
Like this shit. Nobody needed that. That was completely fucking unnecessary. Again, just shut the fuck up. You fucking attention whore.
Earlier you were making a point about the left not understanding the right, and you cited a study from Dr. Jonathan Haidt about that. I was curious why you didn't mention the fact that that study actually said that everybody over-exaggerates the differences between everybody. It's just mostly left people have larger discrepancies between those things. So if you were aware of that difference, the actual conclusion of the study, why didn't you say it? And if you don't know that, then why are you citing studies that you haven't read?
Okay. All right. So what he's talking about is there's Jonathan Haidt's research. They have people fill out surveys about their values as themselves and as other people, right? So obviously, this should go without saying, people aren't 100% in filling out the values when they fill them out as other people. But the overall conclusion, and this is in his book and it's in his research, is that the further left you are, the worse you are at identifying moderate or right-wing positions. So yeah, obviously they're not going to be 100% perfect, and being right-wing or being a centrist does not appear to give you a disadvantage in taking the place of somebody else. So that's why I didn't mention the thing that wasn't that relevant or interesting or compelling.
So this question is directed to both Sean and Stephen. This has to do with general trends that we're having. In 2020, Biden won about 53% of the vote, but he won 70% of the GDP. And more economic prosperity is concentrated in cities. And if we're seeing such a huge rural and urban divide, is the issue with the struggle with national discourse and national unity going to increase? And how are ways that we can fix that going forward?
There's an echo for us on the stage and hearing the question.
Yeah, when you guys speak into your mics, you have to speak directly in, because it's really hard to hear it if it's not directly in.
Maybe step a little closer, actually. I think we could even hear you better.
All right, so the question has to do with more and more cities being concentrated centers for wealth, and those cities also being places for political polarization versus the rural area. Given the trends in our economy, this problem seems to be getting worse and worse. So how would we restructure maybe zoning laws, as AJW pointed out, or the way that we structure our country to kind of bring people together and increase political unity?
So I think it's basically, we're talking about how you're getting a greater concentration of people in cities, and how do you account for that, like in the way that your legislative body is made up? Was that was kind of his question?
I thought he said concentrations of wealth are leading to polarization. Wealth and people, okay.
So I get a lot of heat over this. I really like our bicameral legislature. I like the idea that you have 2 senators from every state, that the state of Nebraska in the Senate has as much power as the state of California. I also like the idea that you have a House that makes it so that, like, 4 or 5 small states can't totally write new legislation for larger states as well. In terms of, like, how do you balance it when you go inside of a state and balance power between, like, cities and rural areas, I don't think that we should balance power based on, it sounded like you were implying that we should do it based on, like, wealth or GDP. I think that there's a lot of people that can offer a lot to the United States that don't just come down to the economic productive power because they happen to work in tech or finance or something else. So, yeah, I don't know if I would restructure things based on those questions. We can always have arguments over how you draw districts or how that goes, but I think that largely speaking, I think that the American system with the way our government is set up right now actually works pretty well. But I think the problem is right now what it's expressing is how polarized the country is, which means the government is pretty ineffective at getting anything done, unfortunately.
And like you mentioned the zoning law specifically, one of the things that like restrictive zoning laws does is it makes it like basically not profitable to build any middle class housing. Like you can have a rich person in a luxury apartment and you're like, oh, you make way more money catering to them. But in reality, if you build a ton of apartments for like low to middle income people, you would probably make more money and you wouldn't be subject to the whims of that small group of people deciding that they want to leave for greener pastures. So the reason I don't need to get rid of every zoning regulation. I understand people want some control over their neighborhood and they don't want to look like some of the most ridiculous images of Houston, which by the way, look those up, they're hilarious. But like we can't let like people in California is one of the worst at this, like vote against people who want to move into their areas to ban every single project from ever being able to be built. Like it's a violation, in my opinion, of their rights because you're giving the current residents rights over people who are in the country and should have equal protection. And it just
he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about.
Makes it impossible to afford to live in these places.
I think one of the other issues is the reason you see a lot of concentration of wealth in the cities is something called the Cantillon effect, and it's just
these people like hear a word.
I don't have an opening.
These people like hear a word and they just fucking repeat it, and I don't think they fully understand what they're saying or the significance of the meaning. Like oh god, it pisses me off. I'm like, what the fuck, dude? Like, are you kidding me? I hear a lot of people do that shit too. I'm like, this word doesn't apply to everything. Jesus fucking Christ.
It's very long, but you can summarize it by saying those closest to the money printer are the ones who benefit the most of it, as opposed to those furthest away who are impacted by higher inflation and the bullwhip effect of rising costs across the world. And so you see that as well in the cities, where so much of this wealth is, essentially fake, because we have this system where you're putting massive amounts of money in at the top. It's benefiting those at the top, and then it trickles down, not very well. Reaganomics, whatever. Again, it's not the 1980s anymore, and I think you're seeing that more and more. So you shut down that system, and that'll actually help to ease some of these issues.
Alrighty, so Jack, you've kind of touched on this a couple times already, but I'd like to hear an expansion.
Can you put the mic up, almost uncomfortably up, eat it?
All right, is this better?
It is actually.
All right, so Jack has touched on this a couple times already, but I'd like to hear an expansion. Instead of a national divorce, can we just return to states' rights and rule and severely restrict federal power to minimal needs, and how can we effectively do that?
I would be totally in favor of that. I am all for that. How we do it is, I hope someone else can answer that one.
Repeal the 17th Amendment.
I'm 100%
How do we do that?
Have a constitutional convention.
Right, but I'm just saying that the likelihood of all of that happening is so slim. I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be optimistic. We will totally get it done.
I think that there's a great amount of productive power that comes from working as one cohesive body rather than 50 separate states. I think there's always places where we can carve out more state rights for certain issues, but I mean, to some extent, it's probably good to have some parity or equalization of rights across different state borders. Sometimes it's a little weird that for instance, I can get arrested, smoking marijuana in one state but not another, or I can smoke somewhere, or I can have a public drink somewhere and not other places. I don't know. I think that hitting parity across some states for certain law, or for some of you might know, there are some states where you can ride without a helmet, and then as soon as you cross into another one, state troopers will pull you over if you don't have a helmet on because of different rules. I think it's okay to have a high degree of mirroring of the laws between the states. Maybe we just carve out more individual state rights for things that we feel are important in the future.
Regarding democracy, is it okay if 90% of...
That wasn't a very strong argument. He should have just said no. I'm not for carving out a bunch of extra states' rights. I quite like the way that our government works as a balance between the federal and state levels. What would he carve out rights for? That was dumb, Destiny. You should have just said what you meant,
The population votes to, slaughter the other 10%. I mean, that's democracy, isn't it? I mean, how do you answer, when the German democracy invaded Poland and massacred 6 million Jews? I mean, democracy has no credibility anymore. I mean, democracy is, Australia. Democracy is, rounding up the Japanese in World War II. I mean, how do you answer all the disasters of democracy?
I do think, maybe that was directed at Stephen, but I do think democracy is a terrible argument for that reason. Obviously, we want limits. Even he would say he wants limits that respect the rights of individuals.
Rights, right? Yeah, I mean, ideally, truly, if we're being honest with ourselves, nobody here would disagree that if 90% of the country wanted to do something, it would happen. Right? That's just, if you have 90% of the people that want to do something, it's going to happen. 90% of the people want to do it. Ideally, the way that a democracy hopefully functions is you have some special protections carved out where people can't vote away the civil rights of other people. But
I don't have an opening.
Democracy is only as good as the people that vote in any given democracy. So there is no, I can't give you a guarantee that well, this will never happen, because I would be lying to say so.
So Destiny has confirmed that he's against.
I'm interested at what people would want in place of democracy. Or, understand that when I refer to, by the way, many constitutional scholars and governmental scholars have all said repeatedly, a constitutional republic is a democracy. It's a style of democracy. So, do with that what you will. It's not direct democracy, and nobody said that. They just said democracy. There are several types of democracies. But yeah, I've heard the constitutional republic. Hey, what's up, Lord Kelmar? In place of a democracy, just one really big McDonald's. As long as somebody cleans up the playground.
90% of South Africans voting to attack white farmers.
I guess so. I don't speak for South Africa's government. I speak for sure.
All right, this question's for everyone, and it kind of has to do with a lot of issues, underlying seem to be with data, personal data, health data, DNA data, speech data, whether it's online, in public data. So do we need a new Bill of Rights for our digital data, for our digital footprint that we put out there in public and on the internet.
Absolutely not. This is hilarious. Your data is our data. You've given it yourself freely. You've given it to Zuckerberg, to Bezos, to everyone. Your data is now ours. There's no rule for this. You will not be given...
I don't know if I can listen to 10 more minutes of this if this guy's going to keep talking like this. I'll smack him with a shovel in Roblox.
Any control of your own data, your own power, your own life, you'll own nothing, you'll be happy. You'll be in Zuckerverse. You'll be given your injections on a bi-daily basis. Your data will be controlled, and your life will be planned out. It'll be very nice for you.
We had a surprise panelist on this one. I mean, I don't know that that would take a brand new Bill of Rights, but I do agree with you that there is a lot of data that is going around.
These people are fucking mind-numbingly horrible fucking people. Destiny did well. Some of the later arguments he made, I think he could have steeled a little bit more. He should have fucking just like been firm, you know, which is that he's perfectly fine with where the federal government and state government's relationship are. That's really what he wanted to say, you know, and he didn't, you know, and that's fine, you know, like, you're in the heat of the moment. He's probably going to go back and look at it and say the same thing, I'm sure. My conclusion is that he was up there with 3 people that were like, I don't even like, it made me realize what a fucking uphill battle we have, because these are fucking spokespeople for, you know, presumably the right. And if these are the spokespeople, I mean, they're going to continue to push divide like as much as fucking possible. They really want that, and it's fucking sad and heartbreaking to see that that's the direction they want to take with their influence, you know. I think we should be looking for more ways to come together.